Hi everyone, this is the second video in our series. We're going to cover JavaScript functions, and functions are in pretty much every programming language. So if you understand them in JavaScript, you'll understand them going into Java and C# and the other classes you got coming up. So let's see. A function is basically a group of commands that you can rerun over and over again. So you can kind of think of a function as a mini program within your program. So the example that I've got here is, let's say we're converting Celsius to Fahrenheit. So here's the equation. In this example, the first number is the degrees in Celsius, and then we multiply it by 5 divided by 9 plus 32. That's the equation to convert 10 degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit. So I've got this expression here, and I'm assigning it to a variable called f1. So look at what I'm doing here. I'm repeating myself over and over again. So the only difference in all these lines is that I'm changing my Celsius temperature. So in the second one, I'm converting 50 degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit, and then 75, and then 100, and so on. So there's a lot of repetitive code here, and one of the rules of programming is to not repeat yourself. If you have a lot of redundant code, it can get real messy to maintain, and also it can lead to bugs. And if you need to make changes, then you'll have to make changes in lots of different places. So for example, right here, let's say I botched the equation, and I did it in all these places. Well, then I'd have to go update all those places. So let's see how we can overcome some of these issues by using a function. So right here in the second code box is a function that converts Celsius to Fahrenheit. So there's a lot to discuss getting started with this here. There's a lot going on in this code, but we'll be using functions so much that it'll all start making sense to you. But I have a feeling at the moment it might be a little bit overwhelming, but hey, you got to dive in. So I think what I want to do is, let's go ahead and copy this code. And now, if you don't have this page open in Sublime Text, go ahead and open it now. So I'm going to, you can pause this and then go ahead and get this page opened up in Sublime Text. And then come back and let's copy the code in the second code box. We'll copy all of it. And then let's go over to Sublime Text. And if you scroll down to line 137, I put in a script tag for us to test this code out. So yeah, line 127, I think that's what I said. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste that function in here. Now I want to format this properly, because the formatting is extremely important. So when I pasted it, I kind of lost some of the formatting, but this is what it should look like. So let's walk through all these steps here, or all these parts of a function. First of all, we start a function with this keyword. So we always put function first. That's a special keyword in JavaScript, so you always have that. And then there's a space, and then after the space comes the name of the function. And we can give it any name we want. There are some rules to it, just like there's rules to variables. And notice that I'm using camel case for this function name. So the second part is the function name that we can make up ourselves. And then we've got parentheses here. So I've got parentheses here and here. And in between the parentheses are what we call a parameter. So, and you can actually have more than one parameter. This function only has one parameter. But a parameter is a value that we can feed into our function. And this is really powerful, because this is going to allow us to convert any temperature into any temperature Celsius into Fahrenheit. And we'll see how that works in just a second. So anyways, inside the parentheses comes the parameter or parameters. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then we've got curly braces. So we've got the opening curly brace here and the closing curly brace here. And everything inside of that pair of curly braces is the code that's going to run when we use our function. So remember, we can use this function as many times as we want, and it's going to run the same code over and over again for us. So I want to point out that when when we're dealing with, we see a lot of parentheses and curly braces in JavaScript code, and they always come in pairs. So a beginner mistake is to forget one part of the pair. So notice here we've got the opening parentheses and then the closing parentheses, and then our parameters go inside those parentheses. And then we've got the opening curly brace and the closing curly brace, and the curly braces enclose the code that is going to run when we use this function. And what we call the body of the function is the code that goes inside those curly braces. So that's the body of the function. So let's look at the body of this function and see what's going on here. So we've got a variable which we call temp Fahrenheit, and then we have an expression here. So we're going to assign the result of this expression to temp Fahrenheit. Now here's where the parameter comes into play. When we'll see how we use this function in a minute here, but this is what allows us to convert any temperature in Celsius to Fahrenheit. So what's going to happen here is we'll use our parameter, and then that will be used in this expression, and then the result will be assigned to temp Fahrenheit, and then what we're going to do is we're going to return the result. So we'll talk about that more in a minute too. So what we've got in these 4 lines of code here is what we call a function declaration. We're declaring a function and we're defining how it works and what it does. And once we've declared a function, then we can start using it. So here's how we can use it. I'm going to bounce back over to the web page here. Whoops. There we go. And so I'm going to scroll on down to the next code box, and let's go ahead and copy all of this here and copy that, and then go back over to Sublime Text and let's paste it right underneath our function declaration. Okay, and now I want to fix the formatting again here too. When I pasted it, the tabbing got kind of screwed up, but it should look like this. Everything should line up nice and neat. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're actually using the function 3 separate times here. So we're reusing this function. And notice how this is much better than what we had up in the first example, where we had before we were using a function, we had the equation duplicated whatever 5 or 6 times. But in this case, we have the equation for converting Celsius to Fahrenheit in one place. If we needed to make a change, we'd only need to make a change in one place instead of dealing with duplicated code. So here's what's going on here. First, we're declaring a variable and we're calling it f1, and then we're using our function. And then to use a function, you put the function name and then parentheses and then whatever values you want to feed into the function. So, and those become the parameters. So right here, I'm feeding in a value of 10, and so once we get inside that function, once the code starts running in the function, in this case, the temp Celsius is going to be equal to 10. So this is the power of functions, is I can convert any degrees in Celsius to Fahrenheit, and I can do that by making the temperature Celsius a parameter. So that allows me to feed in different variables. The second time I use the function here, I'm feeding in a different temperature Celsius. So once again, and when you use a function like this right here, and I'm actually using the function 3 times, but we say we're invoking the function. That's the technical term, invoke, to invoke the function. But what we often say as programmers is we just say call the function. We're gonna call the function convert to Fahrenheit. So invoke or call are pretty much the same thing. So anyways, I'm converting 3 different temperatures in Celsius to Fahrenheit. Now, this function returns a value. Functions don't always have to return things, but this one happens to return a value. So because it does, I can take whatever it returns and assign it to a variable here. So that's why we have var f1 equals, and then our function call. And in our function call, we're passing in various values here for each of these. So hopefully you can see why we kind of call functions mini programs. They're kind of like mini programs that are nested inside of our programs, and they allow us to rerun code over and over again, and they can allow us to pass in different values, and they can work with those values, and those values become what we call parameters once we get inside the function. And the other thing is that functions can return a value. They don't always return a value. We'll see some examples where they don't, but this function returns the temperature in Fahrenheit once we've done the conversion in this previous line here. And if a function returns a value, then when you call it, you can assign the return value to a variable. So we've got var f1 equals whatever this evaluates to when the function completes, when the function returns its value. All right, let's go ahead and run this code here. So I'm going to do Control S to save it, and I'm going to bounce back over to the browser here, and I'm going to open up the developer tool. So I'm going to press F12, make sure it's on the console, and then I'm going to refresh the page, and you can see here these are the results of our code running right there. Now go back over to Sublime Text. One thing that I want to point out is that we've already used some functions in JavaScript. We have used the alert function, that's a function, and the other one we've used is console.log, that's another function, and I think we used the prompt function too. So we've actually been using functions before today. You probably just didn't know that they were functions. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and leave this code here for now. I'm not going to erase it because we're going to add some more to it, but I'm going to bounce back over to our page here. And for the moment, I'll close the developer tool so I can see my screen a little bit better. I'm going to scroll on down to the next code chunk, and let's use this function in a slightly different way. So let's go ahead and copy these 3 lines of code, and then go back to Sublime Text, and I'm going to paste that code right in under there. And now again, my formatting is a little messy. I'm just going to reorganize, get a little situated better here, and I want everything to line up nice and neat. So let's see what we've added here. We've added these 3 lines. So now we used the prompt command once in the last video, but only once. So what we've got is a variable here, and we're assigning it to whatever this prompt function does, whatever this prompt function returns. So this prompt function, we didn't declare it ourselves. This is one that's built into JavaScript. So we didn't have to declare it like we did with our convert to Fahrenheit function. It just came out of the box for us. So let's go ahead and just run this code real quick and see what we get, and then we'll dissect it. So after you paste it in there and get it formatted nice and neat, do Control S to save it, and then go back over to the browser here and then hit refresh, and you'll see here's our prompt running. So our prompt says what's the temp today in Celsius, and I'm just going to put in 45 and then click OK, and then we have an alert that appears, and it's saying today's temp in Fahrenheit is 113. Okay, so let's look at the code now that we've run it and we've seen what it does. So I'll click OK, and I'll go back to Sublime Text, and we'll see here I've got a variable that I called Celsius today, and I'm assigning it to whatever this function returns. So this function, actually what the prompt function does is it returns whatever the user types into that box. So whatever I typed into the box, and I think I typed in 45, that's what will get assigned to this variable. And by the way, this prompt function, it has a parameter. Look at what the parameter is that we feed into it. So anybody recognize this? So this string that we put in as the parameter actually appears in the prompt box. So if you want to, you can run that again to see it again, but the prompt function takes a parameter. Not all functions do take parameters. Okay, so I entered 45 when I ran the code, so the Celsius today is containing a value of 45 by the time this line runs. And then we go down to the next line, and we've got another variable that I called Fahrenheit today, and I'm assigning it equal to whatever this function returns, and we've already seen this function. So this function takes a parameter and converts it into from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So now I can literally convert any Celsius temperature I want, and I can let the user decide what Celsius they want to convert into Fahrenheit to, because we're letting the user supply the value for the Celsius today. Okay, so then once we've converted the Celsius to Fahrenheit, it gets stored in this variable, and then the last line of code is our alert. So the alert says today's temp in Fahrenheit is, and then we're doing some string concatenation right here, and we talked about that last time, and we're concatenating whatever Fahrenheit today is here. So this basically, I think it was 113 is what it came out to. So this is basically a placeholder that evaluates to 113 when the alert pops up. Okay, let's go back to the web page here. See what we got next. Okay, so if I scroll down here, functions can take more than one parameter. So here's a simple little function. Let's go ahead and copy all this code right here in this code box. We'll copy that and go back to Sublime Text. Now I think we're done with this whole convert to Fahrenheit thing, so we can clear out our script tag. So I'll go ahead and wipe out everything inside of the script tag so that it's empty, and then I'll go ahead and paste this in here. And again, I gotta do some formatting. Things aren't lining up just right here. Okay, so I've got a function which I just called some useless function. So I'm declaring the function here, and I've got the function keyword, and then the name that I've given the function, and then this function takes two parameters. So what I want you to note here is that if your function takes more than one parameter, they get separated by a comma. So instead of feeding in just one value that we can operate on inside the body of the function, I can feed in as many values as I want to. I just set them up as separate parameters. So whatever I feed in as param1 and param2, whatever they evaluate to will appear here in our alert. So if I fed in apples and oranges for my two parameters, then what I would see here is an alert that said you passed in the following params, and it would say apples and oranges. So we can see how these parameters are kind of placeholders for the values that we feed into our functions. Okay, and I missed some of there's some more code here that I didn't see before, but so I'm going to go ahead and indent that properly too. So what we're doing here is we've declared our function up here, and right here we're going to use our function. We're going to call it or invoke it, whatever you want to say, and here are the values that we're passing in. So I've got two parameters that I'm passing in, and I'm passing in sugar for the first one and spice for the second one, and those are strings. They're string values, so they go in quotes. So let's go ahead and run that real quick. I'm just going to hit Control S to save it, and then bounce back over to the browser and hit refresh. And here's what we'll see. You passed in the following params. So the function doesn't do anything special, but it just kind of demonstrates how parameters work. All right. So let's go ahead and delete all this code. Let's clear out our script tag again. So got an empty script tag. And then I'm going to go back over to the page and see what's next. And I'm going to scroll down to this one right here. So note that functions don't have to have parameters. And functions don't always return something too. So you can use functions in different ways. Let's go ahead and copy this last code block here. So I'll copy that, everything in there. Go back over to Sublime Text and paste it in, and then I'm going to do a little bit of formatting, get everything lined up just right, and get it set up like this. So here I've got a function called do something, but notice that these parentheses are empty. So that means that I'm not feeding in any values when I use the function. So I don't have any parameters for this function. Even if you don't have parameters, you still need to have the parentheses here when you declare your function. Okay, and then I've got my opening curly brace, then the body of my function, which in this case is just one line of code, and then my closing curly brace right here. So notice that this function doesn't have that return statement. And so sometimes we just want functions to do stuff, but they don't have to necessarily return anything. It made sense for when you're converting things like Celsius to Fahrenheit or inches to miles or whatever. It makes sense to write a function that returns a value, because we feed in the Celsius and it returns the Fahrenheit for us. So when you're doing conversions, your functions will usually return something, and that's when we use that return statement that you saw for the last line in that convert to Fahrenheit function. But in this case, the function just does some stuff, and it doesn't necessarily return anything. And this function doesn't even take a parameter either, so you can have that. And so I've declared the function here, and here I'm invoking it. So this is where the function's actually going to be used. So it's going to run this code that's inside the function body. Let's go ahead and save this. Control S, go back over to the browser, hit refresh, and there's the result of calling that function. So one mistake that beginners will sometimes make when they're going through these exercises is that they'll declare a function, but they'll forget to actually invoke it or call it. So in that case, declaring a function doesn't do anything. In order to use a function, you have to actually invoke it right here. So I've seen that happen quite a bit where students forget that. So don't forget to invoke your functions when you need to. And the last thing that I want to talk about is how we format our code. You've seen me be really particular about formatting as we go through these first two videos. Notice here in this function that we've got the first line of the function, and that ends with the opening curly brace before the body of the function. And then right here I've got the closing curly brace. So these the first line of the function and the last line of the function are aligned vertically, but everything inside of the function is indented, and that's extremely important. Make sure you gotta indent your code properly, because it makes it much easier to read. So everything that's nested inside of the body of the function should be indented, and we'll talk more about this soon. But just be super careful that you be careful with your formatting, because it won't necessarily affect the way the code runs. The browser doesn't care how you format your code, but it'll drive you crazy when you try to read your code and you can't, because you don't have it formatted properly. So because I've got the body of the function indented here, in this case it's just one line, but sometimes our functions have many lines. They should all be indented, and then it's easy to see where the function begins and where it ends and what's inside of it. Because if I wanted to, I could just drop a vertical line from the first line of the function down to the closing curly brace. And like I said, the curly braces always come in pairs, and what I've seen other programmers do is they might format their code like this. Some people like that better. Whatever you prefer, I won't. Either way is fine with me, but just be consistent about the way you do it. But this way you can kind of visually see the opening and closing curly braces a little bit better, I guess. I actually used to do my code this way, and then I got a job at a shop where they wanted everybody to format their code the same, and so I got into the habit of doing it like this. But whichever works for you is fine with me. Just be consistent about it. Now, the other thing that I wanted to point out is that invoking a function is actually a statement, and remember that statements have to end with an exclamation, or what is this, a semicolon. So so when you call a function, if that's all you're doing on that line of code, then you want to end it with a semicolon. There's cases when you'll call a function and you won't put a semicolon after it, but for now, if all you're doing on a line of code is calling a function, then just go ahead and put the semicolon there. JavaScript might be forgiving and you won't have an error, but it's safe just to get into the good practice of doing it, ending all your statements with semicolons. All right, that's going to do it.